You know, it's interesting how sometimes the things we think we've got, like all figured out,
Mm.
the things that seem the most basic, can actually hold these huge mysteries. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, right?
It's totally like that. So get this. I was reading about this science meeting up at Montreal, and one of the researchers was talking about conception. And he said, even now, with all that we know about biology, about how life begins, the way a sperm actually gets into an egg, it's still a mystery.
Oh,
I
wow.
know, right? Like no visible holes or anything before or after. It just kind of becomes,
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's something that always kind of, I don't know, bothered me or maybe fascinated me is a better word. It just seems like there's more to it than just the physical mechanics, doesn't it?
totally. And that's exactly what we're diving into today, this idea that maybe, just maybe, it's our consciousness, our imagination specifically, that acts as this like fertilizing power. It takes all these potentials, all these possibilities, and it makes them real.
Like the sperm in that analogy you were using earlier.
Exactly. Our imagination is the sperm. So,
Mm.
you know how in ancient wisdom and even in like some types of psychology, there's this idea that our inner world really shapes our outer world.
Absolutely, like that whole as within, so without concept.
Yes. And to really unpack this, we're going to be looking at this lecture by Neville Goddard called The Secret of the Sperm. Now, Neville was amazing at taking these really big, kind of out there ideas and explaining them using his own personal experiences and like stories. It makes them so much more accessible.
Yeah, he was a master storyteller, and I think that's why his work resonates with so many people because he makes these complex concepts relatable and engaging.
For sure. And with this lecture, it's important to remember that he uses a lot of symbolism and metaphors. You know,
Mm.
his personal experiences aren't meant to be taken as literal scientific facts, but more like illustrations of these deeper principles. Like, remember how we were talking about that scientist in Montreal, the one who said sperm enters the egg with no physical mechanism?
Right, that no one can figure out how it happens from a strictly physical standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, how can something so solid be breached without any kind of entry point? It's pretty mind-boggling.
Yeah, and that's precisely what makes that observation so intriguing. It pushes us to consider, well, maybe there are explanations beyond the material, maybe there's something else going on.
Exactly. And this is where Neville brings in this totally wild personal experience. He's lying in bed one morning thinking about this very thing, and all of a sudden, he feels himself detach from his body. He's no longer in his bedroom, but in this sealed room. Like no doors, no windows, just him there. And as he becomes aware of this room, it becomes super real, almost like he's physically there.
I've heard others describe similar experiences, that detachment from the physical body and sudden presence in another location. It really makes you question what's possible, doesn't it?
It's incredible. And Neville, he talks about having another experience like this. Again, he finds himself in a different sealed room. And the only explanation he can think of is that he imagined himself there. Like no physical movement, just his imagination transported him.
It really speaks to the potential power of our imagination, doesn't it? The idea that it can somehow transcend physical limitations, at least in our experience.
It's pretty amazing. And so building on these experiences, Neville comes up with this analogy. He says that all these potential states of consciousness, all these different possibilities are like unfertilized eggs. They're just waiting to be activated. And what's the activating force? Our consciousness. He says we have to inhabit a state to really feel its reality, to bring it to life.
So it's not enough to just think about it. You have to really experience it in your mind.
Exactly. It's about the feeling. And to help people understand this, he asks you, the listener, to try a little thought experiment. Close your eyes and imagine you're in a different room in your house. Pick an object in that room, anything, a lamp, a book, a picture. Really focus on it. See it clearly in your mind's eye. Even try to feel it like you're really there.
Oh, I like that. It's like a mini meditation.
And if you can do that, if you can feel the reality of that object in your imagination, then in a way, your consciousness isn't fully tethered to where your physical body is.
It's like you're bridging the gap between imagination and physical reality.
Totally. And here's where Neville drops a huge truth bomb. He says, where you are in your imagination with all your feeling and attention, that's where you are, like really present, at least in terms of your power to make things happen. So when you vividly imagine a desired state, when you really feel it as if it's already real, you're basically fertilizing it. You're setting in motion a chain of events that will bring it into your physical reality.
So it's not just about wishing for something. It's about actively creating it in your mind with feeling and belief.
Exactly. And here's another fascinating point. Neville says you don't have to figure out the how, like the specific steps or actions. All you got to do is fully inhabit that desired state in your imagination. And then, he says, a bridge of incident will appear. It'll connect your current reality with the fulfillment of your desire. Almost like the universe itself orchestrates the necessary events.
Okay, so let me see if I understand this. You're saying that we don't need to worry about the specifics of how things will happen. We just need to focus on the feeling of the desired outcome, and the universe will take care of the details.
That's the idea. It's about trusting that when you truly believe something, when you feel it is real, the universe will conspire to make it happen. But, and this is important, there's also a word of caution here. Neville tells this story about a friend of his in New York City. All she wanted in life was to be rich. Money was everything to her.
So her main focus was on accumulating wealth.
Yeah, like almost to the exclusion of everything else. Now, conventionally speaking, she wasn't considered particularly attractive. But in her mind, she always saw herself as someone with tons of money. She'd walk around, act, and imagine herself as if she was already wealthy. Her parents were kind of worried. You know, they thought she was being a bit delusional.
But she had that unwavering belief in her own mind, right?
Oh, yeah. And wouldn't you know it, her imagination actually worked. It just didn't work out exactly the way you might think. So she ends up meeting and marrying this really rich guy. Only problem was, their whole relationship was, as Neville puts it, full of intimate hostility. They were miserable together for over 20 years. Eventually they get divorced, and she walks away with a huge settlement, millions of dollars. And then later, get this, she inherits even more money from a cousin she barely knew. Well over $1 million in stocks and bonds.
Wow. So she got her wish, but it definitely didn't come easy. There were some serious downsides.
Big time. And Neville really emphasizes this point. He says, yeah, she got the money, but look at the price she paid. All that unhappiness, the terrible marriage. He suggests that if she'd approached it differently, if she'd imagined wealth along with happiness and fulfilling relationships, she could have had it all.
So it's not just about focusing on one specific desire, but about taking a more holistic approach to what you're imagining, thinking about all the different areas of your life.
Exactly. You got to consider the bigger picture. And to contrast this, he tells another story about Robert Millikan, the physicist who won the Nobel Prize.
Right, the oil drop experiment guy.
That's him. Now, Millikan, he also wanted financial abundance. But instead of just obsessing over money, he very deliberately affirmed this statement. He said, I have a lavish, steady, dependable income, consistent with integrity and mutual benefit. Neville talks about how Millikan spent like 16 hours straight just repeating that affirmation over and over in his mind, really feeling it as true.
Okay, so I'm noticing a pattern here. Both the woman in the previous story and Millikan, they both had a laser-like focus on their desired outcome. But Millikan was more intentional about aligning his desire with his values, with this idea of integrity and benefiting others.
Yes. And it's super important. It shows how you can use your imagination to achieve your goals while also making sure you're not, like, compromising your values or hurting other people in the process.
Yeah.
And you know what? It worked for Millikan. Not only did he become incredibly wealthy, but he was also super respected and made these huge contributions to science. He achieved his desire in a way that benefited himself and the world around him.
It's a great example of the power of conscious, ethically aligned imagination. And it kind of makes you think about the intentions behind your own desires, doesn't it?
It really does. And it brings us to another common pitfall that Neville talks about. He calls it perpetual construction, deferred occupancy. Basically, it's when you know what you want, but you're always putting its fulfillment off into the future, like hoping that someday it'll magically appear. Neville's like, nope, that doesn't work. To manifest something, you have to fully inhabit that state in your imagination right now. Make there here, make then now.
So it's about living in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, not just hoping for it to happen sometime down the road.
Right. And he emphasizes that even if you can only hold on to that feeling for a short time, like a few minutes, it still acts as that fertilizer. It plants the seed in your subconscious mind, and that's what sets the whole process in motion. Even if your mind wanders back to your current reality, that seed's already been planted.
It's like that initial spark that ignites the whole process of manifestation.
Precisely. He uses this analogy of an egg. An egg has its own natural timing for, hatching. You fertilize it by occupying the desired state in your imagination, and then you have to just trust that it'll manifest in its own time. It might not happen instantly, but it will happen.
There's a certain beauty to that analogy, the idea of allowing things to unfold naturally in their own time.
Totally. And then Neville gets into this really interesting theological interpretation. He talks about the secret of the sperm as a symbol for Jesus Christ.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm curious where he's going with this.
So he's saying that the sperm represents God's creative power, which is inherent in all of us.
So it's not about Jesus literally being the sperm, but more about the sperm representing this creative force that we all have within us. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. Remember that scripture that says, "By him all things were made, and without him there was not anything made that was made. In him is life." Neville draws a direct connection between his experiences of, effortlessly entering those sealed rooms with his imagination and the biblical accounts of Jesus appearing to his disciples in a locked room after he was resurrected.
Oh, interesting. So he's suggesting that what we might call supernatural abilities or miracles are actually just expressions of our own imagination.
That's the idea. He's basically saying we all have this incredible power to transform our reality by believing in and using our imagination. It's not about praying to some external God to do things for us. It's about realizing that we are the ones creating our reality.
That's incredibly empowering, isn't it? The idea that we have this innate ability to shape our own experience.
Absolutely. But with great power comes great responsibility, right? Neville says we need to be super selective about what states we choose to occupy in our imagination. He says there are both tarnished and untarnished states available to us, both negative and positive possibilities. It's up to us to choose which ones we want to bring into our reality.
So we have the power to choose between, a reality filled with negativity and one filled with positivity. Both are available, but it's up to us to decide which one we want.
Precisely. And he brings up this idea from William Blake, who talked about the sleep of good and evil. Blake was saying that most of us are kind of sleepwalking through life, unconsciously inhabiting states of mind based on our past experiences, beliefs, and all that. We're not really awake to the power of our own imagination.
I see. So it's like we're on autopilot, reacting to things based on our conditioning rather than consciously creating our reality.
Yeah, exactly. But Neville says, hey, we don't have to stay asleep. Once we understand the law of imagination, we can choose to wake up and deliberately enter the states we want. And not just for ourselves, but for others too.
Oh, interesting. So we can use our imagination to help other people.
Totally. He gives the example of imagining a friend getting a new job or having more financial abundance. You just got to vividly fertilize that desired state for them by feeling it as real, and then you got to let go of any attachment to the outcome and trust the process.
Okay, so it's like we're planting a seed of possibility for them, and then we have to trust that it will grow in its own time.
Exactly. And to really drive this point home, Neville shares a story from his own life. During World War II, he was serving in the Army and became eligible for discharge because of his age. Only problem was his commanding officer had to approve it. And guess what? The guy said no.
Oh, wow. Talk about a frustrating situation.
I know, right?
Yeah.
But Neville wasn't about to give up. That very night, he went to sleep and consciously assumed the feeling of already being honorably discharged back in his New York apartment. And I don't mean just picturing it in his head. I mean fully immersing himself in that reality, feeling it with all his senses, like he was actually there.
He was so committed to that feeling, to that state of being. It's amazing.
And get this, around 4 in the morning, he wakes up from this vivid dream where he sees the word disapproved on his discharge form, suddenly changed to approved, like some unseen hand just changed it right before his eyes. And then he hears this voice, clear as day, saying, "That which I have done, do nothing."
Wow, that must have been an incredible experience. It's like his subconscious was confirming that his desire had already been fulfilled.
It really is. And you want to know the craziest part? Just 9 days later, that same colonel who had denied his discharge calls him in and tells him to fill out another application. He says, "You'll be out of the Army today." And that's exactly what happened. Neville was honorably discharged that very day.
It's almost unbelievable. But it shows the power of our imagination, doesn't it? And the importance of not giving up on what we truly believe.
Exactly. And Neville uses this story to remind us that we are responsible for what we choose to imagine and the states of being we assume. We hold this incredible creative power, and it's up to us how we use it.
It's a huge responsibility, but also an amazing opportunity. It means we have the power to shape our own lives, to create the reality we want to experience.
And that brings us back to the fundamental principle. Imagination creates reality. Neville references the 8th chapter of Ezekiel, where these elders of Israel are doing all kinds of bad stuff in this secret chamber of imagery. They think no one can see them, but Neville draws a parallel to our own thoughts and imaginings, the things we create in our minds, whether good or bad.
It's like that quote, "What you think, you become." Our thoughts and imaginings are the building blocks of our reality.
And he explains that the idea of the Lord seeing isn't about some external God judging us. It's about our own awareness of what we're creating within ourselves. Because ultimately, in Neville's understanding, God and human consciousness are one. So we are the witnesses to our own creative process.
We're both the creator and the observer of our own reality.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of our thoughts. Don't dwell on negative, limiting beliefs or unlovely things, because those are also being fertilized in a way. They can manifest in our experience if we give them enough energy.
It's a reminder to cultivate positive, uplifting thoughts and beliefs. Because what we focus on grows.
He also talks about this technique he learned from his mentor, Abdullah. It's about sitting in one place and imagining yourself in a totally different location using all your senses. Neville said, when he opened his eyes while still holding that image in his mind, it was like a shock to his system because it felt so real.
It's like tricking your mind into believing it's somewhere else, making that imagined reality almost tangible.
And Neville concludes his lecture by stating that everything we see around us, everything that exists as our shared reality, was once just imagination. He urges us to awaken to this power and start using our imaginations consciously and deliberately to become the creators of our own lives.
It's an invitation to step into our power, to realize that we are not just passive recipients of fate, but active participants in shaping our own destiny.
So what can we take away from all of this? Well, our imagination isn't just a way to escape reality or a fun little mental game. It's the fundamental power that shapes our world. It's the secret of the sperm. It's the active force that brings potential into being. Just like that scientist in Montreal was saying, it's still a mystery how it all works, but it does work. And it's up to us to choose what we want to create, to be conscious of our desires, to align them with our values, and to trust the process of manifestation.
And to remember that we have this incredible power within us. We can choose to create a reality filled with joy, abundance, and fulfillment. It all starts with our imagination.
Now, I want you to think about this. What would it mean for you to fully embrace this creative power? How would your life change if you consciously used your imagination to cultivate the life you truly desire? What states of being are you currently occupying? Are they aligned with the reality you want to experience? Remember, you are the active force in your own existence. The power is in your hands.